My name is Darcy, and I live in a house with my husband, Carlos, and our daughter, Nikki. Carlos and I met in college and got along really well. I was studying design, and he was studying law. We both joined the same club. After we graduated, I got a job at a design firm, which I loved. Carlos and I dated for a few years and got married in our early 20s. I worked during my early pregnancy, but after Nikki was born, I decided to focus on raising her. Carlos and others encouraged me to prioritize parenting, so now I work from home. Carlos passed the bar exam and is now a lawyer. One day, while I was out shopping, I saw my mother-in-law, Christine, struggling with some heavy bags. I decided to help her. "Darcy, what a surprise," she said with a smile. Since it had been a while since I last saw her, I suggested we catch up over tea. She said she was in a hurry, so I offered to help her carry the bags. I loaded her bags into my car, and even though they were heavy, I felt good about helping her. We chatted about different things on the way to her home, which is about a 30-minute drive. We don't visit often, but we always make sure to see each other for New Year celebrations. As we drove, I noticed she was struggling with the bags and wanted to ask her about something that had been bothering me. On the way to my mother-in-law's house, I noticed the bags she was carrying. One had groceries, while the other contained daily necessities and cosmetics that seemed more suited for younger people than what she usually uses. Her expression looked a bit down, but I didn't ask her about it and just drove her home. "Thank you so much, Darcy. You've been a huge help. This is far enough. I can't take the bags from here," she said when we arrived. As she opened the door, I placed the bags inside, but then I heard a harsh voice say, "Finally, you're back. What took so long?" It was my sister-in-law, Katie. She looked surprised to see me, and I was equally shocked to see her. My mother-in-law seemed flustered as she took in the situation. "Katie, long time no see. How have you been?" I asked, trying to stay friendly. Fine. It's been a while for you too," Katie replied, though she looked like she had just woken up, holding her phone in one hand. "I'm sorry for the sudden visit. I saw Mom struggling with her bags while I was shopping, so I offered to help," I explained. "I just got back from work this morning, so I'm a mess. Thanks for helping, ma'am," Katie quickly said, grabbing the bags and taking them inside. I turned to my mother-in-law and asked softly, "Is everything all right living with Katie?" She smiled and nodded. "Thanks for your concern, Darcy. I'm fine. Sorry I can't even offer you tea." "No worries. It was nice to catch up. I'll visit again," I said, not wanting to press her further. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling I had about what I just saw. My mother-in-law was supposed to live with us after my father-in-law passed away over a decade ago, but my brother-in-law, Brett, said they would stay in the family home and take care of her. Carlos, my husband, was also worried about it. I tried to talk about it, but it didn't go well. Carlos is busy with work, and Katie's parents live nearby, but still, I felt uneasy. My mother-in-law said she didn't need help from me since she wanted to repay the care she received. In the end, Carlos couldn't really argue with her. My brother-in-law and his wife moved into my mother-in-law's house today. I told Carlos about what happened, and he seemed concerned. "That's worrying. Let's call Brett," he said. Carlos called Brett. "Hey, it's been a while. Just checking in on you," he said. "I'm doing fine," Brett replied. After some small talk, Carlos shifted the conversation. They usually talked about how great things were with Katie, and this time was no different. "Good to hear. We're taking an extended vacation next week. Is Mom coming with you?" Carlos asked. Mom said we should just go without her," Brett answered, hesitating a bit. "Then let's have Mom stay with us while you're away," Carlos suggested. "What?" Brett sounded surprised. I looked at Carlos, who smiled and nodded. "We haven't seen Mom in a while, and I think Nikki would be thrilled. I'll call her," Carlos said, cutting off the call before Brett could respond. Carlos took a deep breath, looking serious. We saw this as a chance to help my mother-in-law. He arranged the dates with Brett, and I talked to my mother-in-law. She agreed to stay with us for about a week. Granny's coming today. Isn't that exciting? I told Nikki. She was overjoyed at the thought of her grandmother staying with us. A few days later, my mother-in-law arrived with just a small bag. As soon as she came in, she looked relieved. I'm sorry for intruding for a whole week, she said. Don't worry about it. You're more than welcome. Nikki has been looking forward to this, so please make yourself at home, I replied. And so, we spent a wonderful week together with my mother-in-law. From the first day, I felt uneasy about my mother-in-law's actions. Before she arrived, I cleaned up my home office to make space for her. When I showed her the room, she said, "Oh, you've made such a nice room for me. I feel bad. I'd be fine with just a corner." I insisted she use the room since I only work there. Even so, she still seemed sorry for taking it. With the kids off school, I planned to make lunch for the three of us, but she said, "Let me cook. Can't I use the fridge?" She kept wanting to help with chores. Even though I wanted her to relax, I finally got her to unwind in the living room by having Nikki play with her. She kept saying things like, "Oh, don't go through the trouble of snacks for me. I'm not worth it. Or cold food is fine for me." It felt like she was acting like an outsider rather than family. She used to be much more lively, and it hurt to see her put herself down like this. When Carlos came home, I told him how she was acting. "I wish she would value herself more," he said. "Let's keep an eye on her. It's only the first day." Later that evening, as we were getting ready for bed, my mother-in-law said, "I guess I'll just lie down here for a bit." Carlos and I were shocked because she was trying to sleep on the basement floor. I calmly said, "Mother-in-law, please think of this as your room until you leave. Use a comforter so you don't catch a cold." "Oh, won't that be a bother?" she asked. "Absolutely not. We want you to be comfortable and enjoy your stay here," I replied, looking her in the eye to show I meant it. When I smiled at her, tears filled her eyes, and she finally broke down, saying, "It's been 10 years since I've slept in such a warm place. Thank you." I was stunned by her words. Carlos, shocked, asked, "Ma'am, are you getting along with Brad and the others? How has life been?" She chuckled awkwardly and said, "Well, getting along might be a stretch, but I have to make do. If they ditched me, I wouldn't know how to take care of myself at my age." Slowly, my mother-in-law began to share the harsh reality of her life with us, and it turned out to be much worse than we could have imagined. My mother-in-law was doing all the housework in her home. Whenever Katie was unhappy, she would raise her voice at her. All the shopping responsibilities fell to my mother-in-law, who had to buy everything they needed. On top of that, she was paying most of the living expenses. It seemed clear that her son-in-law and his wife had ulterior motives for moving in with her. They wanted to take advantage of her finances. My mother-in-law usually ate only after Katie and Brad were done, often in the cold basement that didn't even have heating, leaving her freezing during winter. "It's been a long time since I'd had a meal like this. I was always alone," she said. "Are you serious?" we asked, shocked. She explained that sleeping in the basement had become normal for her in her previous home. Both Carlos and I were at a loss for words. When Brad and Katie first moved in, they were kind to her. She was happy and thought living with them was a good idea. But over the years, their behavior changed drastically. At first, Katie would cook, and Brad helped with chores. "I'm so tired. Brad, let me take care of things today. You should rest," my mother-in-law would say. "Really? Thanks, ma'am," he would reply. That was probably the beginning. Then, it changed. "Oh, sorry, Katie, I have plans with the neighbors today." When my mother-in-law mentioned this, Katie snapped, "You're prioritizing them over me." My mother-in-law felt bad and said, "I apologize. I'll prepare dinner when I get back." Slowly, Brad and Katie began to manipulate her more and more. Eventually, my mother-in-law was doing almost all the housework and contributing financially as well. At first, she had used what was once my father-in-law's study as a room. It was a nice space with a bed and other furnishings, and she was happy to use it. But even that space wasn't safe from Katie. One day, Katie suggested, "Let's renovate this old study." "Hold on, Katie. This is my husband's cherished study. Can we please leave it as is? My mother-in-law replied. I'm just thinking of your well-being, Katie said. Why do you have to make me look like the bad guy? I'm sorry, but I like it the way it is, my mother-in-law insisted. This room is outdated, it looks worthless, Katie said as she reached for a glass music box that had belonged to my late father-in-law. He bought the glass music box during a trip they took together, and it was something he cherished, but Katie dropped it on purpose, saying, "Oops, my bad, that wasn't on purpose." "Oh no, the glass is shattered everywhere. That's dangerous. What a waste to keep this room like this, especially with all this junk," she continued. "Please don't touch anything else," my mother-in-law said. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Katie replied. "Fine, I'll leave this study alone, but from now on, you take care of everything in the house. With all this junk, it's too dangerous for you to sleep here. You should sleep in the basement." Any complaints? In the end, my mother-in-law had to agree and ended up sleeping in the basement. Hearing all this made me feel like I might faint. I was also angry with myself for not noticing sooner. "I'm sorry, ma'am. How could I have not realized?" I said. "Don't blame yourself. I was hiding it too. It's pathetic that we never noticed because of my brother-in-law and his wife's schemes. I only had a room when relatives visited, and it was empty, no bed, no furniture. If I said anything, they threatened to destroy my study. They were only nice when people were around. We didn't see what was happening because of that. If I hadn't run into my mother-in-law that day, this could have gone on even longer." The thought sent shivers down my spine. "I always wanted to talk to you about this, but that study and the house are full of memories of my husband," she said, and tears began to flow freely from both of us. Our precious mother-in-law had endured this for over a decade. I couldn't imagine how tough it had been for her. Why would her own family do this? They're not human, I shouted as I hugged her tightly. "Darcy, I'm sorry, I need to step out for a bit," she said after we cried together. Carlos gently rubbed my back and spoke softly. "Don't worry, Darcy and Mom, I'll handle this. Please take care of Mom, Darcy." I nodded quietly. "Leave my mother-in-law to me, Carlos." I hugged our concerned mother-in-law again, stroking her back to comfort her. Then I turned to Carlos and said firmly, "Go teach those awful people a lesson." Of course, Carlos chuckled and nodded before leaving the house. Later, he called to say he wouldn't be back until tomorrow evening. I shared the news with my mother-in-law, and we drank warm milk together, trying to lighten the mood with good stories. Nikki, who had heard the commotion, looked worried and joined us. I wanted to help erase some of the bad memories. Usually, I remind Nikki not to stay up late, but since tomorrow was a day off, the three of us enjoyed chatting until we were content. "All right, that's enough for today. Mother-in-law, would you like to go shopping with us tomorrow?" I asked. "We can buy whatever you want and eat delicious food. There's a cute dessert place that Nikki loves. Let's enjoy a relaxed day, just the three of us." Mother-in-law's eyes filled with tears again as she nodded slowly, repeating, "Thank you, thank you." That night, we spread an air mattress in the living room and slept closely together, with mother-in-law in the middle. The next morning, she greeted us with the same smile she used to have when father-in-law was alive. "Good morning." As promised, we had a fun shopping day. In the evening, we got a message from Carlos saying he was back home, so we headed back too. Before entering the house, I turned to my mother-in-law. "We're on your side. Whatever is hurting you, just let it out here. We will always be by your side." "Me too. I'm on Granny's side as well," Nikki added. Mother-in-law nodded silently. When we got home, Carlos greeted us with a warm smile. I had Nikki and mother-in-law wait in my home office. As I walked into the living room, I was shocked to see my brother-in-law and his wife sitting on the floor, their hands resting on their knees, trembling slightly when they saw me. They greeted me softly, looking nervous. What happened? I thought, and I turned to Carlos, who was still smiling. He said, "I haven't done anything yet." The word "yet" made me tense, expecting something dramatic. "Let's get to the point. Starting today, Mom will be living with us," Carlos said. I felt relieved to hear that. He continued, Brett, do you understand what you've put Mom through? And you too, Katie. Do you realize how you've treated someone else's mother in her own home? It's not entirely your fault that we didn't notice, but you have to take responsibility. You're supposed to be adults. Carlos spoke firmly, and I had never seen him so angry before. He added, I usually don't like to mix work with family, but today I'm speaking as Miss Christine's attorney, not just as family. His voice was friendly but cold. Brett and Katie responded meekly, yes. After several hours of discussion, we made many decisions. First, Brett and Katie would no longer live with us. They had to return all the money they had taken from mother-in-law and pay her extra as compensation. We decided to respect her feelings about her study and home, so Brett and Katie moved out, and we banned them from entering her house again. Hearing this made mother-in-law smile sadly. So we're family, right? Asking for damages feels too much. No, this is a gesture from our son Brett to Miss Christine, Carlos replied. Brett nodded vigorously, looking like he was about to explode. Yes, I'm truly sorry for everything. Please accept this as our sentiment. He looked so small, like he had just been defeated. After the talk, Carlos took a deep breath and turned to mother-in-law. Please accept this, ma'am. Let's end this. Brett and his wife will remember what they've done and ensure it doesn't happen again. They both nodded silently, and seeing this, Carlos smiled gently and continued in a quiet voice. Well, it will never happen again, right? I asked. Yes, never again, they replied eagerly. So, the conversation ended on a good note. A few months later, we received the damages that Carlos had arranged from Brett and his wife. Mother-in-law wanted to give the money to us as a thank you for helping her, but we refused. She insisted, so we agreed to take a little each month for groceries, letting her keep the rest. I was curious about what Carlos had said to Brett and his wife that day, so I asked him when we were alone. Carlos scratched his head, even though it wasn't itchy. Don't lose faith in me, he said. Why would I? You helped mother-in-law and made them regret their actions. Carlos explained that he had contacted Brett right after he heard what happened. It's strange for me to say, but I rarely get angry. When I do, people say I can be scary. I think I really scared them when I called. He described how, even though it was a bit awkward, he drove straight to confront them. When he arrived, he immediately questioned Brett and his wife. I couldn't let this go, especially since he's my brother and I trusted him with Mom. Carlos didn't know all the details, but judging by how scared they looked, he must have been terrifying when he was angry. On their way out, they bowed deeply and said, We're really sorry. Well, mother-in-law seems happy, and so does Nikki. I'm happy too. Thank you for standing up for us, Carlos, I said. I'll continue to do my best for our family. It felt good to know we could still be a happy family. I was grateful for my dependable husband and for mother-in-law, who chose to rely on us. From now on, I plan to make up for hardships by being a caring daughter-in-law and doing my best in every way.